My name is Claire, I'm 34 years old, and after years of hard work I finally managed to buy the one thing I always dreamed of, a quiet mountain cabin, nestled among the pines, overlooking a crystal-clear lake. It wasn't the most expensive property in the world, but to me it was priceless. Every corner of that cabin represented sacrifice, long nights at the office, skipped vacations, and a life built on determination. For the first time, I felt I had carved out a piece of peace just for myself. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story. It was late on a Friday afternoon when the call came. I had just settled into my favorite chair with a book and a cup of tea, enjoying the silence only broken by the distant call of loons across the water. The phone buzzed, and my sister Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated. Rachel and I had always had a complicated relationship. She was 3 years younger, but somehow always managed to act as if she was the older one, making demands, expecting things to bend her way. I answered, trying to sound cheerful. "Hey Rachel, what's up?" Her voice was hurried, dripping with that familiar entitlement. "Claire, perfect timing. We're on our way to your cabin. There's going to be 9 of us. I told everyone you'd have enough space. Get some food ready and prepare the guest rooms. We'll be there in about an hour." The words hit me like a thunderclap. "Wait, what? 9 of you? Rachel, you never asked me about this." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she replied, almost laughing. "You've got that whole cabin all to yourself. What's the big deal about sharing? It's not like you're using all those rooms anyway. Plus, my friends are really excited. I told them we'd have the full lake house experience. Bonfires, swimming, the works." My hand tightened around the phone. Memories came rushing back, patterns I had seen my whole life. Rachel taking things without asking, Rachel making promises in my name, Rachel pushing boundaries and me swallowing my frustration just to keep the peace. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Rachel, you can't just announce that 9 people are showing up to stay in my home. That's not how this works." She sighed, annoyed. "Claire, seriously. Stop acting selfish. You've always been so uptight. This is family, and I already promised everyone. They're counting on me. You won't make me look bad in front of them, will you?" Her tone was light, but I knew the weight behind it. That mix of guilt and pressure had always been her favorite weapon. Only this time, something inside me shifted. This wasn't a borrowed sweater or a forgotten favor. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't about to let Rachel and her entourage turn it into their playground. As I ended the call, I looked out at the lake shimmering under the evening sun. The stillness of the water contrasted sharply with the storm that was about to arrive. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a confrontation years in the making. The phone call from Rachel had shaken me, but the truth was, it wasn't just about her sudden announcement of arriving with 9 people. It was about everything that came before, every memory of a childhood where my needs seemed invisible while hers defined the family. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where winters froze your eyelashes and summers smelled of cut grass and cheap barbecues. My parents worked hard, sometimes too hard. Dad drove trucks across state lines, gone for days at a time, and Mom rotated through waitressing jobs, always coming home tired, but still trying to put food on the table. We never had much, but I never complained. What I couldn't ignore, though, was how whatever we did have seemed to flow in one direction, straight to my younger sister, Rachel. I still remember the first time I realized things were different. I was about 10 years old. My coat from the year before was too small, the sleeves cutting into my wrists, the zipper stuck halfway. I begged for a new one before the next snowstorm hit. Mom sighed and told me we didn't have the money right then, but that I was tough and could make it another season. 2 weeks later, Rachel walked into the living room in a brand new pink parka with faux fur on the hood, twirling like a princess. "She's sensitive to the cold," Mom explained, as if I was made of steel. It didn't stop at coats, school supplies, shoes, even meals. I'd be told to finish leftovers or reuse notebooks, while Rachel showed off sparkly binders and fresh pens with her name written in glitter ink. If I questioned it, Dad would say, "She's the baby. You understand." But after a while I stopped understanding. I just swallowed the sting and moved on. By middle school, I was already babysitting on weekends, stocking shelves at the corner store after school, saving coins in a coffee tin hidden in my closet. I had dreams of going to college, and I knew the only way I'd get there was on my own. Rachel, meanwhile, coasted. Dance classes, summer camps, birthday parties with rented clowns, things my parents insisted she needed for her confidence. The unfairness grew sharper in high school. I remember saving for 6 months to buy a silver necklace with a small blue pendant. It was the first thing that was truly mine, something I had worked for. I wore it proudly twice before it vanished. I found it later in Rachel's room, broken, the pendant missing. She had used it to decorate one of her dolls. My voice shook when I confronted her, but all she did was shrug. "Relax, Claire. It's just a necklace." When I turned to my parents, hoping for support, Mom put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You should be flattered she admires your taste." That sentence burned into me. Admiration, they called it. Theft, I called it. And no one replaced what was lost. Meanwhile, Rachel was being cushioned at every step. When it came time for college, I packed my bags for the state university with barely enough for tuition, planning to work 30 hours a week just to survive. My parents gave me a hug and said, "You'll figure it out. You're smart." Rachel's path was entirely different. They opened a savings account for her years before, one they never created for me, and by the time she graduated high school, she had her tuition fully covered for a private college. I still see the images in my head, me hunched over textbooks at midnight, eyes red from exhaustion, stomach empty because I'd skipped dinner again to stretch my paycheck, while Rachel posted photos from Cancun, smiling with friends on spring break, every trip funded by Mom and Dad. It wasn't that I wanted to hate her. She was my sister. A part of me even loved that she was carefree, untouched by worry. But another part of me resented how she weaponized it. If I confronted her about taking my things, her face would twist into that practiced pout. "Why are you always so mean? Don't you love me?" And of course, my parents would swoop in. "She's younger, Claire. Be patient." But patience was running out. By the time I finished college, my perspective had hardened. I had lived off ramen noodles, stretched secondhand shoes until they had holes, and worked myself to the bone. Rachel had glided through her years with sorority houses and endless parental support, and now, years later, hearing her voice on the phone, commanding me to prepare food, rooms, slippers for 9 strangers, it wasn't a new outrage, it was the echo of every old one. Her words weren't just careless. They were a reminder that she still saw me as the girl who would always give in, always make space, always sacrifice. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman who had carried herself through fire, who had built something of her own, piece by piece. And as much as my chest tightened with the old guilt, another voice inside me whispered louder, "This time, Claire, you don't have to say yes." When I left for college, I carried everything I owned in 2 suitcases and a cardboard box that smelled faintly of the diner where I had worked. My parents hugged me, told me to stay strong, and then drove Rachel to her dance rehearsal without even waiting to see my dorm. That was the first time I realized that stepping into my own life also meant stepping alone. College wasn't easy, it was survival. I woke up before dawn to work the breakfast shift at the campus cafe, pouring coffee for professors who would later lecture me about economics and literature. Between classes, I scrubbed trays in the dining hall or graded papers for pocket money. My evenings were spent shelving books in the library until the last student left, then dragging myself back to a dorm room where the heater rattled like it was ready to explode. I had 3 jobs, 15 credits, and no time for much else. Most nights, dinner was whatever I could grab for free at work. Leftover bagels, half-eaten sandwiches that hadn't sold, coffee that had been reheated twice. My body was exhausted, but my mind was on fire with one thought. If I just kept pushing, one day I could break free from the cycle my family had locked me in. Rachel, on the other hand, was living in another universe. She called me from her private college on the East Coast, her voice buzzing with excitement about sorority mixers and spring break trips. "You wouldn't believe the yacht party we're planning," she gushed once, while I sat on a bus headed to my overnight babysitting gig, shivering in a coat with a broken zipper. I smiled through the phone, but when we hung up, I cried quietly into the window. The contrast wasn't just painful, it was fuel. By sophomore year, my hard work began to show. One of my professors noticed how often I stayed after class asking questions, how my essays had margins filled with extra notes. He recommended me for a research assistant position in the computer science department. The pay wasn't great, but it was more than the cafe, and more importantly, it gave me access to labs, mentors, and a world where I could see myself building a career. I still remember the first time I logged into a server at midnight, the screen glowing in the empty lab while I wrote code no one believed I could master. My hands shook with exhaustion, but also with excitement. For the first time, I wasn't just working to survive, I was working to create. There were moments of doubt, nights when I collapsed on the dorm bed too tired to move, when the temptation to give up whispered louder than my ambition. But each time, I remembered Rachel's carefree laughter, the way my parents indulged her whims, the necklace they told me to take as a compliment. That pain hardened into determination. By senior year, I had managed to scrape by without debt. That, to me, was victory enough. I graduated with a degree in computer science, calloused hands from work, and eyes rimmed with fatigue, but I walked across that stage with my head high. My parents clapped politely. Rachel posted pictures from her own ceremony weeks later, where my mom and dad posed proudly with her in front of marble columns and golden banners. They hadn't traveled for mine. Still, I didn't let bitterness drown me. I had something Rachel didn't: resilience. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level job at a small tech startup in Chicago. The salary barely covered rent, and my apartment was a single room with a leaky radiator and neighbors who fought loud enough to shake the walls. But I was grateful. Every morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. Every night, I stayed until the cleaners turned off the lights. I volunteered for every project, even the tedious ones, because I knew each one was a stepping stone. Some of my coworkers laughed, saying, "Claire, do you even sleep?" I smiled but kept typing. Sleep was a luxury. Survival was the goal. 18 months later, the sacrifices began to pay off. My boss called me into his office one Friday evening, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but kind. "Claire," he said, "I've watched you push harder than anyone else here. You're getting results. We want you to lead the next project." I left that office with a promotion and a raise. It wasn't much, but it was proof that grit could break through. That night, I bought myself a small celebration dinner, pasta with real vegetables and a slice of cake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was simply surviving. I was beginning to build. Rachel's updates kept coming, of course, calls about how she was changing careers again, about how mom and dad were helping her pay for another round of classes, about trips to Europe she needed for inspiration. Each time I hung up, I felt the old ache. But each time, I also remembered my progress. The real turning point came when I received a job offer from a larger company in San Francisco. The salary was double, the opportunities limitless. I called my parents expecting maybe, just maybe, some pride. Instead, Dad's first words were, "Why so far away? What about family? What about Rachel?" It was like being hit in the chest with a familiar hammer. Even in my victory, I was supposed to orbit her needs. That was the day I decided I had to leave, not just Chicago, not just the cold, but the entire orbit of family expectation. I packed my life into 2 suitcases, sold the rest, and boarded a plane west. San Francisco was overwhelming at first. Skyscrapers, tech giants, rent that made me choke. But it was also possibility. I shared an apartment with 2 strangers to save money, walked to work, and poured myself into learning everything I could. My reputation grew, promotions came faster. Each paycheck, I saved what I could, refusing to fall into the trap of showing off. And slowly, something extraordinary began to take shape. The dream I had carried since childhood, the dream of owning a place of my own, a sanctuary no one could steal, break, or claim as theirs. I didn't know when or how, but I promised myself one thing. One day, I would build a life that was untouchable, and no matter what Rachel or my parents thought, it would be mine. San Francisco gave me opportunities I never could have imagined, but it also gave me exhaustion. The city moved at a pace that left no room to breathe, and the tech world was relentless. For years, I pushed harder than I thought possible, volunteering for projects, climbing the ladder, saving every penny I could. My coworkers spent bonuses on cars, clothes, trips to Bali. I packed mine away into a high-yield savings account, whispering the same promise to myself every time I hit deposit. This isn't forever. This is building. The image that kept me going wasn't a sports car or a luxury vacation. It was a cabin by a lake, a place where the air smelled of pine instead of exhaust, where the only sound at night was water lapping the shore. I had never even stayed in such a place, but the picture had rooted itself in me since childhood. Maybe because I never had space that was truly mine. Maybe because I had always wanted somewhere Rachel couldn't reach. Years passed, and my savings grew. I moved up in the company, leading teams, negotiating contracts, proving myself again and again. But I never let the money slip through my fingers. My apartment was modest, my clothes practical, my meals simple. When friends teased me about being frugal, I smiled and stayed quiet. They didn't understand that discipline was the only reason I had made it this far. Then, one spring afternoon, I saw the listing. A lakeside cabin, 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The photos showed sunlight spilling across wooden floors, a fireplace in the living room, and a deck that seemed to float above the lake itself. My heart hammered in my chest as I clicked through the pictures. It was everything I had imagined, almost as if someone had built it straight from my daydreams. The price was staggering. Still, after 15 years of saving, of saying no, of pushing harder than I thought I could, I was ready. Signing those papers felt surreal. My hand shook so badly that the realtor had to slide the pen back to me twice. When it was done, I walked outside and sat in my car for an hour, staring at the lake as tears blurred the world. This was mine. Not borrowed, not gifted, not handed down. Mine. The first weeks were a blur of moving boxes and decisions. I had never decorated a place entirely on my own, so I took my time. I found a handcrafted oak table from a local carpenter, hung paintings of mountain trails, picked quilts in deep blues and greens that mirrored the water outside my windows. Each choice felt sacred. Each piece was a brick in the fortress of peace I had longed for. One evening, after arranging books on the shelf, I stepped out onto the deck with a glass of wine. The sun was setting, painting the water in streaks of gold and violet. For the first time in years, I felt a stillness inside me, a quiet joy I hadn't thought possible. I whispered aloud, as if to seal the moment. I made it. My days settled into a rhythm I had never known. I woke to birdsong instead of car horns, brewed coffee while mist floated across the lake, and worked from a desk positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon sun. In the evenings, I cooked simple meals in the small kitchen, teaching myself recipes I had never had time for before. Sometimes I swam in the lake until my muscles ached. Sometimes I sat on the dock with a book until the stars came out. It wasn't just a house, it was healing. Of course, I shared some of it online. Not much, just a few photos of the view, a corner of the fireplace, a sunrise over the water. Friends from the city commented with envy, telling me I was living the dream. What I didn't realize was that Rachel was watching too. She didn't call at first. Instead, I noticed small things, likes on my photos, comments from her friends tagging each other beneath my posts. It made me uneasy, though I couldn't say why. Rachel and I hadn't spoken in months, and even when we did, our conversations were shallow. But something about the attention from her circle gnawed at me. Still, I brushed it off. I was too busy enjoying what I had built. I hosted my first small gathering, just a handful of close colleagues who had supported me for years. We grilled on the deck, laughed under string lights, and toasted to new beginnings. As I looked around at the people who genuinely celebrated my success, I felt a pang of something I hadn't let myself admit: loneliness. Because even surrounded by friends, a part of me wished my family could see this without resentment. That they could walk through these rooms and simply say, "We're proud of you." But I knew better. Pride was never given freely in my family. It was always filtered through Rachel. That night after my guests left, I sat on the dock with my feet in the water, the moon reflecting in ripples. I should have felt only joy. Instead, unease flickered through me, as if peace, in my life, never lasted long. The call from Rachel came 1 week later. Her voice was sweet, too sweet, laced with excitement. "Claire, your cabin looks amazing. Everyone's talking about it. We should come visit. Actually, we're already planning a trip. There's going to be 9 of us. You don't mind, right?" My stomach dropped. In that moment, the lake behind me felt less like a sanctuary and more like the calm before a storm. Rachel had always been good at bending reality. As children, she could spin the smallest thing into a grand story, and, somehow, people believed her. She once told her classmates that she was a distant cousin of a famous actress, and for weeks the other kids treated her like royalty. I thought she'd grow out of it. She didn't. After I bought the cabin, her little stories grew into something bigger. At first, I didn't notice. I rarely checked her social media, and when I did, it was filled with selfies, captions about manifesting abundance, and carefully posed shots of expensive things I knew she couldn't afford. A handbag she definitely hadn't bought, a dinner in a restaurant I doubted she'd paid for. None of it surprised me anymore, but then, one of her old college friends, Jordan, messaged me. "So excited for the family getaway at the lake house," she wrote, adding a smiley face. My hands froze over the keyboard. Family getaway? I hadn't invited anyone. I called Rachel immediately. What are you telling people about my house? Her laugh came sharp and practiced. Oh, relax, Claire. I just said we have a family place by the lake. No big deal. No big deal? My voice rose. That's a lie. You told them it's family property? Technically, she said smoothly, you're my family. So what's the difference? I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. Rachel, this is my home. I bought it. You don't own a single brick of it. God, you're so dramatic. My friends just want a nice getaway. Don't you want to show off a little? Let them see how successful you are? But I knew the truth. This wasn't about me showing off. This was about Rachel saving face. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing the signs, photos of the lake, pulled straight from real estate listings I had long since forgotten, now posted on her page with captions like, "Our summer escape," and "Can't wait to be back at the family cabin." She posted pictures of herself in beachwear, hinting that she had spent weekends at our place, when she hadn't stepped foot on my deck once. Worse, she wasn't just telling harmless stories. She was making promises. She bragged to her circle of friends that they'd all be spending time at the cabin, a luxury vacation at her family's property. She showed them my photos and pretended the view belonged to her. When I confronted her again, her tone shifted from playful to irritated. Claire, I already told them. They're counting on it. Don't make me look like a liar. You are lying, I snapped. Whatever, she shot back. They don't need to know the details. It's still family. Just let us stay. You have plenty of room. I hung up, my chest tight with anger. It wasn't just the entitlement, it was the audacity to use my hard work as her prop, her backdrop for a fantasy life she could never sustain. A week later, the phone rang again. This time her voice bubbled with excitement. We're coming next weekend. 9 of us. Don't stress, we'll bring snacks. Well, maybe not enough for everyone, but you can stock up on the big stuff. Towels, beds, slippers. You've got all that, right? I nearly dropped the phone. Rachel, you can't just show up with 9 people. I have work. I have my own life. You didn't even ask me. You don't need to act selfish, she shot back. This is family. They're already on board. I told them all about the bonfires, the lake swims, the guest rooms. Do you really want to humiliate me by backing out now? That word, humiliate, hit me harder than her usual guilt trips. It wasn't about family, it was about her image. She had built her lies so carefully that the only way to maintain them was to force me into playing along. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. I looked around my cabin, the sanctuary I had built piece by piece, and it no longer felt safe. It felt exposed, like Rachel had cracked open a window and was letting strangers crawl inside. For the first time, I understood something I had ignored for years. Rachel wasn't careless. She was deliberate. Every story, every manipulation, every guilt trip was designed to keep her world intact at the expense of mine. And now, she wasn't just crossing boundaries, she was erasing them. I set the phone down on the table, staring at the lake beyond the glass doors. The water rippled in the wind, calm on the surface but churning underneath. It mirrored exactly how I felt. Rachel was coming. She had made promises in my name, and she expected me to fold, like I always had. But deep inside, another voice rose up. For the first time, it was louder than the guilt, stronger than the fear of conflict. This is your home, Claire. If you don't stand your ground now, you never will. The day Rachel arrived started deceptively calm. The sun filtered gently through the pine trees, the lake glittered like glass, and I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, trying to shake off the uneasy weight in my stomach. She had called the night before, insisting she was coming, no matter what I said. I had gone to bed hoping it was just another one of her empty threats. But deep down, I knew Rachel never threatened without follow-through, at least when it came to me. At exactly 11 a.m., the crunch of tires on gravel broke the stillness. I looked through the security camera feed on my phone and felt my chest seize. 3 massive SUVs rolled up to the gate, glossy black, stuffed with luggage strapped to the roof. Doors opened, and people spilled out, strangers to me, all in their 30s, dressed in bright vacation clothes, sunglasses perched on their heads. Rachel was the first one I recognized, waving like it was a family reunion. "Claire, open the gate! We're starving!" she shouted, her voice carrying through the speaker. I stepped outside, staying on my side of the driveway. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Rachel!" I called back, my voice sharp. I told you not to come." Her smile faltered, but only for a second. Then she plastered it back on, louder this time, as if volume alone could erase my words. "Oh, don't be silly. You have all this space. Just let us in. We'll make ourselves at home." One of her friends, a tall man in designer shorts, walked up beside her. "So this is the famous cabin," he said, eyeing the lake behind me like he already owned it. "Looks even better than the photos." My stomach dropped. Photos. I hadn't posted pictures of the inside. That meant Rachel had shown them the real estate listing, or worse, told them stories that weren't hers to tell. "This isn't happening," I said firmly, raising my voice so the group could hear. "You weren't invited. I didn't agree to host you." Confused glances rippled through the crowd. A blonde woman in a wide-brimmed hat frowned. "Rachel, you told us she was excited to have us. That this was your family's summer house." Rachel's face turned red. She snapped at the woman, "Don't start with me now." Then she turned back to me, voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Claire, don't embarrass me in front of my friends. Just open the gate. We already drove hours to get here." "No," I said simply. The single syllable hung in the air heavier than I expected. Rachel blinked, stunned, as if I had spoken a foreign language. Then her expression hardened. "Claire, stop playing games. They all took time off work. We planned this for weeks. Do you want me to look like a fool?" "You already do," I answered, the words slipping out before I could soften them. A murmur spread through the group. Someone pulled out their phone and started filming. My pulse spiked, but I forced myself to stay calm. If Rachel wanted a performance, she wouldn't get it from me. "Listen, everyone," I said, directing my words past my sister. "I wasn't told about this trip. Rachel never asked me. This is my home, not a rental property. You can't stay here." The tall man scoffed. "So what are we supposed to do? Sleep in the cars? Hotels here cost a fortune." "That's not my responsibility," I replied. "You were misled." "I'm sorry for that, but you can't stay in my house." Rachel's composure cracked. She grabbed the gate with both hands, rattling it. "You're unbelievable. After everything I've done for you, you're going to slam the door in my face, in front of my friends?" I laughed bitterly. "What have you ever done for me, Rachel? Name one thing." Her mouth opened, then closed, her face flushed with rage. "I'm your sister." "That should be enough." I shook my head slowly. "Not this time." For the first time, I noticed some of her friends pulling back, whispering to each other. A woman with auburn hair crossed her arms and stepped toward the SUVs, clearly uncomfortable. Another man tapped Rachel's shoulder and muttered, "Maybe we should figure something else out." Rachel snapped at him. "No one's going anywhere. She always caves. Just watch." That was the line that broke something inside me. She always caves, the old pattern, the role I had played my entire life. She was counting on it, banking on my weakness to carry her lies. But standing there, with the lake behind me and strangers at my gate, I knew I wasn't going to fold this time. "Rachel," I said, my voice steady now, "you can scream, you can guilt me, you can tell your friends whatever you want, but this house is mine. You're not coming in." The group went silent. For the first time, Rachel looked uncertain. Her hands dropped from the gate, her smile gone, replaced by something sharper, desperation. The storm had only just begun. The silence at the gate stretched for several seconds, heavy enough to press against my chest. Then, as if on cue, Rachel's voice shattered it. "You're heartless, Claire!" she screamed, slamming her palms against the gate. "You'd rather humiliate me in front of everyone than just let us in. You're disgusting." I stood 10 feet back from the gate, arms folded, trying not to let the tremor in my hands show. "I'm not humiliating you, Rachel. You did that yourself when you promised people something that wasn't yours to give." Her eyes blazed. "Liar! You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your lake house. Well, guess what? Without me, you'd have no one. You're nothing but a cold, selfish woman who doesn't know what family means." One of her friends raised a phone, recording every word. "Rachel," I said, glancing at the camera, "you're on video. Are you sure you want to keep screaming like this?" That only made her louder. She rattled the gate again, yelling, "Open this door right now, or I swear you'll regret it." The group behind her shifted uncomfortably. Some looked embarrassed, others angry. The auburn-haired woman finally spoke up. "Rachel, you said this was your cabin. That you co-owned it with your sister Rachel spun on her, eyes wide. And so I do. She's just being difficult. Don't believe her. The woman's arms crossed. We drove 6 hours based on your word. If this isn't yours, you lied to us. Rachel's face drained of color. Shut up, Megan, she hissed. But Megan didn't back down. A ripple of whispers moved through the group. Phones glowed as more people began texting, scrolling, searching. Rachel whipped back toward me, desperation tightening her features. Claire, you're making me look bad. Just 1 week. 1 week is all we need. I shook my head. No. I've worked too hard to let you turn my home into a stage for your lies. This isn't about family, Rachel. This is about you using me. That was when she snapped. She grabbed the chain-link side of the gate and started climbing, her sandals slipping against the metal. If you won't open it, I'll come in anyway. My heart lurched. Rachel, stop. That's trespassing. She didn't care. Her friends shouted in surprise, some telling her to stop, others laughing nervously. The woman with the camera zoomed in, capturing every second. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit speed dial. Yes, I told the security company operator when they answered, my voice tight. This is Claire Thompson at Lakeview Drive. My sister and a group of uninvited people are attempting to force their way into my property. Send someone now. Rachel reached the top of the gate, hair wild, face twisted. You think you're better than me? She shouted down. You think money makes you more deserving? This should have been ours, Claire. Ours! Get down before you hurt yourself, I snapped. Before she could swing over, a golf cart whirred up the road. Frank, the security guard from the community entrance, pulled up beside the SUVs. He stepped out, voice calm but firm. Miss Thompson, are these people expected guests? I met his eyes. No, they are not invited, and I want them removed. Rachel froze on top of the gate, her hands clutching the bars. You can't do this. I'm family. Family can't trespass. Frank looked up at her evenly. Ma'am, family or not, if the owner denies entry, you are trespassing. Please climb down before you injure yourself. Otherwise, I'll have to call the sheriff. Gasps rippled through the group. Someone muttered, This is insane. Rachel's friends began retreating toward the SUVs, their vacation dreams unraveling. One man shook his head. Rachel, this is embarrassing. You told us everything was set. Rachel's eyes darted wildly, her grip trembling. Don't listen to her. She's just jealous. She hates when I'm happy. But her voice cracked, and I saw it, the thin shell of control crumbling. She wasn't angry anymore. She was desperate, exposed in front of the very people she'd tried to impress. Megan, the auburn-haired woman, spoke again, louder this time. Rachel, stop. This isn't your place. You lied. Don't drag us into this. The words hung like a verdict. Rachel's fingers slipped, and she climbed back down, landing unsteadily on the gravel. Her face was blotchy, streaked with sweat and tears. Frank gestured firmly toward the SUVs. Everyone needs to get back into your vehicles. This property is off limits. Rachel spun to me one last time, her voice shrill and broken. You'll regret this, Claire. I'll make sure everyone knows how cruel you are. But her friends didn't follow her lead. They shuffled toward the cars, some glaring at her, others shaking their heads. The cameras lowered, the whispers grew. I stood my ground, my pulse racing but my voice steady. Leave, Rachel. You're not welcome here. For the first time in my life, she had no power over me. When the SUVs finally rolled away, the gravel crunching under their tires, I thought I could breathe again. My knees trembled, my palms were slick with sweat, but for the first time, I had stood firm. I had expected silence after that confrontation, maybe days of angry texts, maybe passive-aggressive posts online. Instead, not 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with a familiar number, my parents. I hesitated before answering, already knowing what was coming. Claire? My mother's voice exploded the second I picked up, sharp and wounded. How could you do this to your sister? She called us sobbing. She said you locked her out, left her stranded with 9 friends who had nowhere to go. Is that true? I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. That's not what happened, Mom. Rachel showed up uninvited with 9 people. She told them this was their vacation spot, that she owned part of it. She lied to all of them, and to you. Don't twist things, Mom shot back. She said she asked you weeks ago, and you agreed. Now you're changing your mind last minute just to punish her." My throat tightened with anger. "Weeks ago?" "She called me 30 minutes before she arrived." 30 minutes, Mom? Does that sound like planning to you?" There was a pause. Then Dad's voice cut in, heavy with disappointment. "Claire, couldn't you have just let them stay for one night?" "They drove all that way," I almost laughed. "Dad, it wasn't about one night. She planned 3 weeks. She wanted me to play host, cook, clean, provide everything, while she paraded my home as if it were hers. That's not family. That's exploitation." Mom sighed dramatically, the sound I knew too well. "Your sister's been through so much lately. She needs support, not rejection." I felt something snap. And what about me? Do I ever need support? Did I get it when I worked 3 jobs to pay for college? When I lived off instant noodles just to survive? When I saved for 15 years to buy this house? My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "Rachel's always been your priority. I've always been the backup plan, the one who doesn't need anything because I'll figure it out." Well, I figured it out, and now she's trying to take it from me. There was silence. For once, they had no ready excuse, no quick defense. Dad finally muttered, "We'll talk about this later." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. The pattern was so familiar it almost felt scripted. Rachel cried. My parents scolded me, and somehow I ended up the villain. But this time, the script was breaking. That evening, I discovered why. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hi Claire, this is Jordan. I was one of the people with Rachel today. I just want to say, I'm sorry." Curious, I asked what she meant. Her reply came quickly. "Rachel told us this was your shared family cabin. She promised us rooms, activities, even said you were excited to host. We never would have come if we'd known the truth. She put us in an impossible position. Some of us already booked hotels nearby, but people are upset. She's losing friends over this." I read the words twice, relief and sadness swirling together. For once, people saw Rachel for who she really was, not the charming, put-together woman she projected, but someone who lied so easily it had become her way of life. More messages trickled in that night. One friend admitted they had chipped in for rental cars and food because Rachel told them accommodations were covered. Another confessed they had grown suspicious months ago when she bragged about owning things she clearly couldn't afford. Piece by piece, the fantasy she had spun around herself was unraveling, and for the first time, I wasn't the one forced to clean up the mess. Of course, Rachel didn't go down quietly. The next morning, she blasted a tearful video on social media. In it, she sobbed about how her cold-hearted sister had thrown her out, how she had been left to fend for herself with nowhere to go. She begged her followers to imagine the pain of being betrayed by family, but the comments didn't go the way she hoped. I scrolled through them later, heart pounding. Instead of sympathy, people who had been there the night before jumped in with their own accounts. "She lied to us," Megan wrote bluntly. Claire was clear. "Rachel set this all up without asking." Ethan added, "She told us it was her cabin." It wasn't. Don't fall for this act. Rachel deleted the video within hours, but the damage was done. Her carefully constructed image was cracking, and the cracks were spreading faster than she could patch them. For me, the fallout was different. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent a private message. I saw Rachel's post, just wanted to say, "You were right to stand your ground. Some of us have noticed the favoritism for years. We just didn't have the courage to speak up." I sat at my kitchen table, the morning light spilling across the wood, rereading those words. Courage. For so long, I had believed I was weak for giving in, for staying quiet. But maybe strength wasn't about enduring. Maybe it was about saying no, even when your whole family told you not to. And in that moment, I knew. Rachel hadn't just lost credibility with her friends. She was starting to lose the power she had always held over me. The weeks after the confrontation at the gate were heavy, even in the quiet beauty of the lake. The air smelled of pine, the sunsets painted the water gold, yet tension lingered like a storm cloud that refused to move on. My parents called constantly, each conversation circling back to the same refrain. "You were too harsh. Rachel just needs love. Family is supposed to forgive." But every time, I stood my ground. "Forgiveness doesn't mean being used," I told them. "Love doesn't mean letting someone lie about me or steal what I've built." They didn't like hearing it. Mom would sigh and say, "You'll understand when you're older." Dad would grow quiet, disappointed, as if my boundary was some kind of betrayal. and each call left me drained, staring out at the lake with a mix of anger and sorrow. It was during one of those long evenings that my friend Taylor called. She had been with me since college, the one person who always told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. "You need help, Claire," she said gently, after I vented about yet another guilt-filled phone call. "I know," I admitted, "but what kind of help?" "I can't change them." "No," Taylor said, "but you can change how you deal with them. You've carried this weight your whole life. Maybe it's time to put it down." Her words echoed in my head long after the call ended, and the next morning, I searched for a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. That's how I met Dr. Larson. Our first session felt strange. Sitting in her cozy office with bookshelves lined with psychology texts and a framed picture of a calm forest on the wall, I didn't know where to start. But once I began talking, the words poured out like a flood. Childhood memories of being overlooked, the necklace Rachel broke, the nights I went hungry in college while she vacationed in Cancun, the way my parents always excused her behavior while expecting me to be strong. Dr. Larson listened without judgment, nodding, occasionally asking quiet questions. Then she said something that made my breath catch. "Claire, what you've described is a family system built on roles. You were cast as the responsible one, the caretaker, the self-sufficient child. Rachel was cast as the special one, the one who needed protecting. Those roles became your cage, and every time you try to step out, the family pulls you back." Her words hit me harder than I expected. A cage, yes, that was exactly what it felt like. "But how do I get out of it?" I asked. "You already started," she said. "At the gate that day, you broke the pattern. That's why it felt so terrifying, but also why it was so powerful. Every boundary you set from now on will be a step toward freedom. The hard part is that your family will resist because your change forces them to confront theirs." Over the next sessions, we dug deeper. I realized how often I had minimized my own needs, how I equated worth with sacrifice. If I wasn't suffering, I felt guilty. If Rachel wasn't happy, I felt responsible. And slowly, I began to see the truth. None of that was mine to carry. Meanwhile, Rachel was unraveling. Through whispers from extended family, I heard she had lost several friendships after the lake house incident. People were tired of the lies, tired of being used. She had bounced between apartments, relying on short-term favors, but doors were closing. The fallout of her deception was catching up. My parents, of course, wanted me to rescue her. "She just needs a place to stay until she gets back on her feet," Mom pleaded. I didn't hesitate this time. "No, my home is not her safety net. She has to face her own choices." "You've changed, Claire," Dad muttered. "You're colder now." I felt the sting of his words, but also recognized something new. I didn't believe them. I wasn't colder. I was stronger. 6 months after the confrontation, my father surprised me with a private call. His voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted, "about how we treated you differently growing up. I didn't see it before, but you might be right. We thought we were protecting Rachel, but maybe we were crippling her, and we relied on you too much because you never complained. I'm sorry, Claire." The apology wasn't perfect, but it cracked something open in me. For the first time, I felt seen. Rachel, meanwhile, had found a job, thanks not to my parents, but to one of the few friends she hadn't alienated. It was entry-level, customer service at a call center, far from the glamorous image she liked to project. When she texted me about it, her tone was unusually subdued. "It's humbling," she wrote, "but maybe it's what I need." I didn't reply immediately. Part of me still burned with anger, but another part recognized that she was finally facing reality. As I closed my phone and stepped out onto the deck, the lake shimmered under the setting sun. For the first time, I felt like the calm water reflected something inside me. Not guilt, not fear, just peace. Dr. Larson was right. I had broken the cycle. And though the road ahead wasn't simple, I finally believed that I could walk it on my own terms. 6 months had slipped by since the day Rachel arrived at my gate with her entourage, demanding a free vacation at my cabin. The seasons had shifted, summer's warmth faded into the fire-colored leaves of autumn, and now the lake reflected the crisp stillness of early winter. My cabin had gone through a transformation too. It no longer felt like just a building I purchased, it felt like a reflection of me, my safe place. My boundary made real in wood and stone. Mornings became my favorite ritual, I'd wrap myself in a blanket, step onto the deck with a steaming cup of coffee, and watch the mist float above the lake. There was silence, but it wasn't empty. It was alive, breathing with me, reminding me that peace doesn't arrive by chance. It arrives when you finally stop letting others steal it. But healing didn't mean the ghosts disappeared. They came back in waves. Sometimes I'd see Rachel's name flash across my phone screen, and instantly, my chest would tighten. Old instincts would rise. Answer quickly, fix things, make peace before it explodes. The difference now was that I had learned how to pause. Therapy had taught me that pause was everything. I'd breathe and ask myself, is this really my responsibility? Or is it just guilt dressed as duty? Most of the time, the answer was clear. It wasn't mine. My parents didn't adapt as quickly. They still called often, their voices carrying the same old tune. "She's your sister, Claire. She needs you. Don't be so cold. Can't you help just a little?" My mom's sighs over the phone were sharp enough to cut. For years, those sighs had bent me into compliance. But now, I found words I never used before. "Mom," I said one evening, my voice calm but firm, "loving someone doesn't mean letting them disrespect you. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're protection." On the other end of the line, silence. Then a quick change of subject, as if my words were too heavy to carry. I hung up and sat in the quiet, realizing that for the first time, her disapproval didn't crush me. It only reminded me of how much I'd grown. My dad surprised me. One night he called alone. His voice was lower, uncertain. "Claire, I've been thinking about what you said, about how we treated you when you were kids." He cleared his throat, like the words were stuck. "I didn't see it then, but I remember now. Times we told you to give Rachel your things because she needed them more. Times we celebrated her smallest steps but ignored your biggest wins. We thought we were being fair. Maybe we failed you both." I closed my eyes, tears burning at the corners. An apology wasn't going to erase decades of imbalance, but it cracked something open. It was the first time I felt like he truly saw me, not just as the responsible one, but as his daughter who had carried too much for too long. Rachel, meanwhile, had gone quiet. No angry calls, no fake tears, no sudden appearances at my gate. From a cousin, I learned she had taken a job at a call center. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't match the fantasy life she posted online, but it was real. One Sunday, she called me. Her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't dramatic. It was small. "I know you hate me," she whispered. "I don't hate you," I said softly. "I hate what you did." That's different. Silence stretched across the line. I heard her shaky breath, almost like a child again. Then, unexpectedly, she said, "I'm trying, Claire." For real this time. Did I believe her? Not fully. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rescue her. Whether she stumbled or stood on her own legs wasn't mine to decide. That was her journey. And realizing that, letting go of her choices, felt like another layer of freedom. Meanwhile, I started filling my own life with something Rachel could never touch: joy. Not forced joy, not pretending, real joy. I hosted my first dinner with friends at the cabin, just a small group: Taylor, a couple of colleagues, and 2 neighbors I'd grown close to. We hung string lights across the deck, grilled food as the sun sank, and laughed until the air grew cold. At one point, Taylor lifted her glass and said, "To Claire, who finally stopped giving in. And to this house, which now only holds the people she chooses." Everyone laughed, glasses clinking in the warm glow. I smiled so wide it almost hurt. For years, every gathering had felt like work, like I was performing. But that night, it was real. It was mine. After they left, I sat at the dock with my feet hovering above the black water. The stars were mirrored on the surface, scattered like diamonds. My chest ached, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. For the first time, I felt that every version of me, the little girl who was told to understand, the student who starved while Rachel partied, the woman who once thought no meant unlovable, they were all inside me, but no longer steering my life. The truth had become simple. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out, they're doors. And I finally realized I get to decide who walks through them. Winter pressed its hand against the lake, covering its edges with glassy ice. The pines whispered when the wind slid through them, and the cabin glowed warmly against the cold. I had settled into a rhythm, a life where peace was no longer borrowed but fully owned. But one evening, as the snow fell in slow, hushed flurries, my phone rang. Rachel's name lit the screen. I hesitated. Every muscle in me wanted to ignore it, to preserve the quiet. But something urged me to answer. Her voice was fragile, almost broken. "Claire, I wanted to say thank you." The words stunned me. Thank you? For what? For not letting me in that day. For finally saying no. I gripped the phone tighter. "Rachel, you nearly destroyed everything I built. You lied to your friends. You tried to use me." "I know," she whispered, "and I hate the person I was then. I thought if I could pretend to live in your shadow, people would finally see me. I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "I'm in therapy now. I've been sober for 3 months. I'm working, paying rent, trying to stop pretending." For the first time in years, her words didn't feel like manipulation. They felt raw, naked, real. "I don't know if I can believe you yet," I admitted. "But I want to." "That's enough," she said softly. I wanted you to know I'm trying." When the call ended, I sat staring at the snow outside. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. What I felt was lighter. Maybe Rachel really was taking her first steps into her own life. Whether she succeeded or failed, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. For the first time, I was free from her weight. Spring thawed the lake months later. I planted wildflowers around the cabin and repainted the porch railings. Friends came and went, filling the house with laughter and stories. I worked hard, but I rested harder. I allowed myself to celebrate every step I had taken to get here. And when family visited, only the ones I invited, the cabin didn't feel tense, it felt open. My father came one weekend with fishing gear. He was quieter than I remembered, but more present. At dinner he said, "Claire, I wish I'd seen things sooner. You deserved better from us." "You still do." I nodded, words caught in my throat. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I ever expected. Even my mother softened, little by little. One afternoon she stood in my kitchen, watching me slice vegetables. "You always were stronger than I gave you credit for," she admitted. "Maybe I leaned on that too much." It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the wall. For now, that was enough. One evening Taylor and I sat on the deck watching the lake turn to gold under the setting sun. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Not letting them in that day. Standing your ground." I smiled faintly. "Every day, for about 5 minutes. Then I remember the silence I would have lost, the peace I would have surrendered. And I stopped regretting." She raised her glass to me. "Here's to peace that you don't apologize for." We clinked glasses, laughter rising with the night air. 6 months later, Rachel visited me. Not with friends, not with demands. Just herself. She stood at my gate, a single suitcase at her side, her hands trembling. "I'm not here to stay," she said quickly when I opened the door. "I just wanted you to see me. Like this." Her eyes were tired but clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I'm working. I'm paying my bills. I've been sober 9 months, and I wanted to thank you in person. You saved me, Claire. Not by letting me in, but by finally shutting me out." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Rachel, you saved yourself. I only stopped enabling you." We didn't hug, not yet. But we didn't fight either. For us, that was progress. As she left, I stood by the lake, the evening quiet wrapping around me like a promise. Life wasn't perfect, family wasn't fixed, but I had changed. And because I had changed, everything else could begin to shift. I share this because I know I'm not the only one who's felt trapped by family expectations, by guilt disguised as love, by years of being the strong one while someone else took and took. Maybe you've lived it too. Maybe you're living it now. If there's one truth I've learned, it's this: boundaries are not the end of love. They are the beginning of respect. And you deserve both. So let me ask you, have you ever had to set a boundary with a family member, even when it hurt? How did it change you? Share your story in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who might need courage today. Because if my story taught me anything, it's this: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no, and in that no, you'll find your freedom.